Hey, welcome to the show. You are tuning in to the Teresa Lusk show. And today I have a fabulous guest. Listen, I have heard so many great things about Texas State Senator Bob Hall. He is a man of faith. He is a man who's been in the military, a businessman. But you know what? He stands up for traditional values. He stands up for the faith community. And I can't wait for you to get to meet him. We'll talk about some of the bills he has sponsored that have actually passed and Governor Greg Abbott has signed into law. We are super excited to welcome our guest, Texas State Senator Bob Hall.
Well, thank you, Teresa, for that very kind introduction. I'm very glad to be here with you.
Thank you.
You're talking along the lines of something I very much enjoy talking about.
Well, this is the time to talk about it, Senator, because, we're at a time where I think it's really important for the elected officials to allow their faith to shine in this season. What do you say to that? And is this common for a lot of our elected officials here in Texas? What do you see going on? How can Texans and Americans as a whole find some hope for our state and our nation?
Well, I think it's going to take a lot more prayer to get God back involved in what we're doing, or more people that recognize that we are a Christian nation founded on Judeo-Christian values. It's it was by God's hand this country was created for some good reason, and it's done a lot of good in the world as a result of it. If you take a look at what America has been to the world, it's kind of like God's shining light. While he's waiting to get back to doing whatever he's going to do with Israel, I believe he's been having America lead the way in the world. And we've led the world out of poverty. We've led the world into technology. Sometimes I wonder whether that's really a good solution or not with what we have developed in technology, but it is what it is where we are today. And I think he's getting pretty disappointed in us as we have drifted away from him over the years. Because our form of government as a constitutional republic, it only works with righteous people. It is not one built for unrighteous people, because you just can't have enough jails or enough policemen to clean the place up. Our whole form of government of protecting individual rights has the other half of that is individuals demonstrating their personal responsibility in handling those rights. And unfortunately, people seem to get hung up on talking about their rights, but they fail to recognize they have responsibilities tied with them. But when you put those two together, you don't need whole lot of laws. If you go back and look at the way that the country was founded, you would assume that other people are going to just obey the law. That's the nature of it. So you don't have to worry about what other people are going to do. You've got the individual relationships with people that we're guiding where we're going. And today, people get so wrapped up in this high speed, instant gratification, very narrow tracked me life that I think we're drifting away from where God intended. I know we are, and we've got to get back there. A day of reckoning is coming if we do not recognize that we are sliding into Gomorrah at an ever increasing rate. And as I watch this next generation, I have a great deal of concern of what our grandkids are going to be growing up in.
100%. I definitely agree with you, Senator. I think, too, you're bringing up a great point about, it takes righteousness. But, a lot of this starts in the home. I really believe it starts there. I think that the homes have actually neglected raising up the children in the way that they should go. So it's definitely affecting how we live and what we're seeing in these younger generations. I would hope that we can grab a hold of some hope for something. I think if they were to get squeezed enough, maybe there'll be a turn. But I want to talk to you about your Senate Bill 1968 from 2017, and it was aimed to protect the rights of student groups at public universities to receive official recognition and funding, regardless of their beliefs and practices. And it was passed by the Texas legislature and signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott emphasizing your commitment to supporting Christian recognition. This, you have a trail of this, it seems like. Tell me about that. And I know that it was passed a while back, but this is one of the things that I think is important as we talk about our state and our nation going in the right direction. Unfortunately, we have to get laws going now to protect the rights. But what made you stand for this? What made you sponsor this bill? And what kind of results are you seeing with that?
Well, it came about because what I was seeing happening in our universities and colleges around the country, in that Christian organizations were becoming chastised way too much, uh, and their rights to have people like Charlie Kirk and others that would come on the campus where would get heckled off of the campus, run off the campus, and the campuses, the schools doing absolutely nothing about it. And so we decided, let's, if they're this is one of those situations that I just kind of cringe when we sit down and think about, we're going to write a law to tell people to behave themselves. We're going to write a law to tell people to respect other people's beliefs and their right to express themselves. I said, that's basic to our Constitution. And it so seems absurd that we're having to do this, but we had to do it. And so we did it so that our organizations there would have something they could point to in telling the administration, hey, you're not providing us the protection that you need to be providing because we're being harassed because of our religion.
Do you feel like it has, do you see the difference that it's made? Is what kind of change is it making?
Well, I see. We have received far fewer complaints from our Christian organizations that they're having a hard time being allowed to form or holding meetings. It is dropped as a result of that bill.
Good. That's great news. I'm so glad to hear that. I want to talk about Senate Bill 29 from 2021. It sought to prohibit social media companies from censoring users based on their viewpoints. I heard that, I read that it did not pass. And by the way, Senator, if there's any information I get wrong, please feel free to correct me because I don't want to misrepresent your hard work. You were trying to help companies from being censored, as we saw that was kind of the trend there for a while, and I actually believe it's still going on. What do you say to that?
Oh, it still is. I mean, it's unfortunate. Unfortunate we have the I guess with technology comes what we have in the internet, and what we were seeing a great deal of not just misinformation being put out, but people who spoke the truth that was not aligned with the message that the government wanted to have put out. And we do know that the government was behind. We now know, I didn't know at the time, how involved the federal government was in directing social media outlets to censor people, to not publish, not put out, and to not let the word get out if it was not consistent with whatever the current lie that the federal government wanted to tell. I knew they were having an influence on the media, mainstream media, but I didn't realize how much it was there. And now that we know, that's a bill that we very much need to have passed, because our government has no business censoring people. And that's what we learned is concerned. It wasn't the companies themselves so much, but it was the government involved in it. But the other side of it is we put some restraints on media before we got to the internet the way it is in what they can do and what they can't do in censoring people. And we need to make sure that we follow through so that legitimate opinions can indeed be expressed without being worried about someone trampling on them because they don't agree with it, because they have an agenda that they're trying to push.
Absolutely. I hope that is something that can get established. I don't know about how controlled it will be. I think the laws can be put down, but I don't know if I believe that they won't try to get away with it. I mean, I think they do it now. I don't think that they care,
Well, and it will be one of those laws that I have great reservations about even passing, because of the unintended consequences of how it could be misused to do just the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish here. And so anytime you're trying to write legislation to control just bad behavior, uh, or getting near trampling on individual rights, where you forget the fact that my rights end where your rights begin, and vice versa. And in order to have that to work, I've got to willingly reel in my rights. So I make sure that, see, it's not, you should not have to stop me from doing stuff. I should be stopping myself from doing it out of respect for you. And
Right.
that's what we need to get back to, because you try to write a law that keeps people from doing that, and you're going to have it misused. You're going to have it being used just the opposite of what you really intended for it to be.
Absolutely. I really hope I used to pray a lot and just say, Lord, make something happen there because this is too much where the social media giants are able to block you and keep you from expressing yourself according to what they were okay with. And I just thought that was too scary. A lot of times we blow up these companies, the media, the government, but I always say, God is still God and he's still on the throne. So we can continue to pray that something will be done for sure. The other bill I want to talk to you about is Senate Bill 2022 that prohibited local governments from contracting with abortion providers or their affiliates. And then it was passed by the legislature. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Uh, which session was that in? We've had a couple of bills like that.
Oh, sorry. This was, well, maybe there's a newer one. This was from 2019. I just pulled some ones that I thought were really interesting because they line up with conservative values for sure.
That was before we really got our tight anti-abortion bill passed. And what we were doing was getting the government out of funding abortions.
Mm,
We didn't want to use taxpayer money for funding abortions. And
that's
so
right.
that's what that was aimed at.
Okay, very good. And then last one that I want to talk to you about, then I'm going to kind of go a little bit of a different direction, but yet the same. Senate Bill 17 from 2019, it aimed to protect the religious freedom of business and individuals from government discrimination based on their beliefs. One of the things, Senator, that I always think about, how when you apply to a job or something and it says, we will not discriminate based on race and gender and religion. And I always ask myself this question: does that really apply to Christians? I always ask that. I think it applies to probably most religions, but I don't know that I believe that it protects Christians. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what's the importance of that this type of bill, this type of law for Texans? Because I think a lot of people assume that because we're in Texas, that everything is extremely conservative. But I'll be honest, and I'm sure you can tell us from your very, very personal experience, that there is a fight against the people of faith and us being able to express our freedom and et cetera. So what do you say to
Oh,
that?
no, there's no question about that. I mean, we've had legislators get up and walk off the floor because they weren't going to even participate, even to the extent of voting no on a bill that had to do with protecting religious freedom. Uh, no, it's a misconception that Texas is suffering. Maybe not as much as some other parts of the country, but from somewhat of a very strong anti, and I'll just use the word religion, um, idea that almost that it's a very atheistic attitude that is out there, and you see it every time you something comes up and say, well, we will have to invite the other groups, or we'll have to do this, open it to somebody else. And I would say no, just if they want it, they show up. Nobody's going to run them off, but people should be free to express their beliefs, and they should be able to hold to that. I was when we went through the COVID issue, I was adamantly trying very hard to get a bill that would require companies to accept the religious exemption for vaccines. And because it was the one that was most commonly turned down. Of course, most companies were determined they weren't going to accept any exemptions, no matter what people said. But that was the one they really went after quite a bit. And I said, that is absolutely wrong, because we very clearly, our founding fathers, put that in the Bill of Rights, our freedom of religion. That means we get to choose, and it means we now have to tolerate other people choosing stuff that's different than what we believe.
Right.
Because when that was written, the freedom of religion, what they were talking about was which Christian church were you going to choose to go to? Was it the
Mhm.
Congregational church, or was it uh, uh, any one of a number of
Mhm.
variations of Christian religion? Because that's basically all that really existed here at the time. But the
Right.
word has grown now to include pagan uh, devil worship as a
Mhm.
religion, and the way it's written, okay, if that's what it is, then make it fair across the board. Don't pick and choose to just go after the Judeo-Christian values, folks.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because you kind of speak into the other question because oftentimes when I have people on the show who really stand up for Christian values and Christians, I always ask, do you feel the same way about supporting a non-Christian's right to practice their religion and to be safe from discrimination? And I'm very much a Christian. There's no apology in my faith, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're talking about laws, it's a little bit different, right? You have to expect that those freedoms are for them as well. Is that something that you would say yes to? That you agree that you do try to, whether you agree with their way or what they choose is another thing, but everybody gets the right to practice freely.
Yes, as long as that it doesn't include human sacrifice or some
Absolutely.
or cutting off body parts or things of that nature. Yes, they are.
Mhm.
But when there are lines to be drawn, because you got to remember there were religions in world history in which human sacrifice was a part of it. That was
Right.
in very early days. That was their form of abortion. Just have the baby and then
Mhm.
throw it in the fire. And so yes, we can respect their rights to do what they want to wear what they want to, and so on. But when it comes to crossing the line of things like that, then that's where there has to be a line drawn somewhere.
Absolutely. So what do you say is the state of our state? I love Texas. I think it's the greatest state really in the nation. Uh, what do you say to the state of our state, though? I know that you get a very up close and personal view and insight into what is happening. What are some things that, as Texans, and I know you represent the 88th legislature, but what can you say to us who are concerned about our state? We are concerned about the fight that we see happening, where we know that they would love to take it and turn it over. What do we need to know? What do you see the state is like, and what do we need to know?
We we uh, we certainly are not the same country we were just a few years ago. But I tell you, the thing that concerns me the most that we need to figure out how to turn things around, and that is how and what we are educating our young children today,
Mm,
what they're being taught, and what their parents know about parenting. One of the biggest problems we have, and this may not be aligned with what had in mind, is that we're now in about the third generation of children being raised by parents who did not themselves have parents, and they
mm,
don't know what to do or how to do it. And that was reflected recently in a conference I had with about a dozen school superintendents to talk about issues that they were concerned about. And their
mhm,
number one issue, they all agree, this is number one, way above everybody else, was violence in the classrooms in the lower grades, 6 and under, all the way down to kindergarten.
mm,
Violence in the classroom, student on student and students on teachers. Numerous teachers actually having to be sent to the ER with damages
wow,
from students attacking them. the fact that students attacking other students because these kids had never played with somebody else, and they see another child that had something, they wanted it, and they just going to go take it away from them because at home
Wow.
everything was theirs. Uh, they're showing up. They don't know their ABCs, the one, two, threes. They don't even know what colors are. They're being brought in on the lower end of actually very ignorant of the basic things you need to have a foundation for learning. And I'm afraid as they progress, I mean, here in Texas, we're proud of a lot of stuff. Only 32% of our third graders read on grade level across the state.
Mm.
That's the average.
Wow.
Any good county doesn't, school doesn't deviate from that by very much. And by the time you get to the 12th grade, our seniors at graduation, there's only 8% that are considered college ready.
Wow.
And so I am very concerned about the slide in education that's happening, and a lot of that is coming from the dysfunctional family, the family that has left the church, the family that is split up, and 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 the blended family that is a disaster. And our government has worked real hard at trying to destroy families.
Yeah.
Lyndon Johnson did a great job in destroying the black family, and it has never recovered from it. But we've got self-destruction going on with the others in this life we've got. I mean, think about the times you go into, was at a restaurant the other night, looked over, there's about a 2.5, 3-year-old kid that was playing with a little iPad, very little iPad, and hollering and screaming while he was playing with it. And his parents were sitting there at the table, and both of them were on their iPhone doing something through the whole meal. That was what was going on. And so one of my biggest concerns about Texas is the disintegration of the family and the foundation building for the future generations. But other than that, we kind of lag behind. We lag behind some states and some things, and we lead this other states. I mean, we're great on Second Amendment. We got a bill passed last session that made Texas a sanctuary state for Second Amendment. No law enforcement can enforce a federal law in Texas that's greater than a Texas law. So if feds come up with some big law on magazine size or calibers or something, that it won't be enforced here in Texas.
Wow.
We've so yeah, we do lead in some things. We lag some in COVID. We've got a very dysfunctional Texas medical board that actually caused a lot of deaths in Texas because they went after doctors who prescribed off-label use of ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and budesonide, and caused them a lot of grief, and caused a lot of doctors not to use those very effective treatments. And as a result, we probably had thousands of people in Texas that died because of the Texas Medical Board and our Health and Human Services not doing the right thing. But
What about the border? Do you feel like Texas is doing their part to protect us from the invasion at the border? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, again, you probably get to see quite a bit of stuff going on regarding that. What can we expect? We don't know what's going on except if somebody like yourself comes on to tell us.
unfortunately, we have a very sick, perverted situation with our border, with what the federal government has done, that has purposely encouraged people to come into this country illegally, and it is illegal, and refuse to do anything about it. Uh, there is no law that needs to be passed. All the law we need to handle immigration is already on the books. When Trump was in office, he had the policy of remain in Mexico or remain in your home state while you sought asylum. And so they've used that asylum seeking to allow all sorts of people in, including an incredible number of young males between the ages of 18 and 35 that are obviously military trained, that are now here in this country for whatever reason. I think we're going to find out soon. But our hands are tied. I would actually like to see us enter into an interstate compact with other states
Mm.
and have them join with us with the National Guard and physically take over the border and just tell the
Wow.
federal government to come and stop us. Uh,
Mm.
that's what we did at the park down there when the government says we couldn't stop them from coming across. We took over that park down at the border and said, "Oh
Okay.
no, well we're going to do it. And if you don't like what you're doing, then you come stop us physically." And they
Mm.
backed off. They backed off
Okay.
on cutting the razor wire. They backed off on other stuff. I just think we need to take to to crank it up a notch and get the other state. We do have several states, National Guards that are down here. They're kind of token numbers in there, but at
Okay.
least they're here. And we just get them
Okay.
to add to it and then physically stop. But the problem is we now have the federal government is sending planes into Mexico and other Central American countries to actually fly them directly into the cities around the country, whether it's Chicago or San Francisco or New York. And so it's not just coming across the border anymore.
What is the goal with that?
You know, when you talk about what the goal is, why would the federal government want to bring folks into this country that are not really there to contribute significantly uh, to the economy? That are going to be that are a burden on it. It's a terrible financial burden on it,
Right.
uh, and it's a disruption. Uh, there a great deal of concern among people out there that there's going to be an uprising, that there will be an uprising among these that have come
Mhm.
across. We know that there's a significant number of uncontrolled uh, weapons that are out
Mhm.
there that are
Mm.
available. We know we have an election coming up in November, and very well could be that there will be a significant civil unrest between now
Yep.
and November that will allow the federal government to implement martial law. And then there would be no election. And once
Mm.
martial law is implemented with the Democrats in charge, it will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get the martial law taken off.
It's been a while since I've heard that theory on the martial law thing. It's been a while. I think it's interesting. It is very concerning. You see a lot of the footage, and I always wonder how can we as Americans see the footage of the invasions and even of what we saw the other day when they were going against the border patrol, you know, uh, excuse me, the officers. And I thought that is so dangerous. How can any American really? How can any American see that with their very own eyes and deny what it is and how dangerous it really is? It's amazing to me.
But what's the difference between that and the Black Lives Matter and riots that took place in the summer of 2020, in which billions of dollars of property were destroyed and dozens of people were killed?
Yeah.
Even an ex-policeman defending his friend's business was killed, and there was almost nobody prosecuted for that. Nobody. And that was
Yeah.
real damage. And you saw, I know you saw with the mainstream media reporter standing there in the background. You see this building ablaze. You see
Yeah.
things being thrown and people kill, total chaos. And he's talking about it's mostly a peaceful demonstration.
Yeah.
And I mean that
Yeah.
was real. I mean that's they actually did that. And
Yeah, I saw it.
then you fast forward from there to January 6th, and you now have people in jail that all they did was go into a building. All they did
Yeah.
was in Washington, D.C., and we're finding out in their trials they couldn't prove that they didn't
Mhm.
go into the Capitol illegally. And so they're being put in jail up there. And we now got a report recently that when the initial investigation was made, they said, "What are we going to do about what happened on January 6th?" So they made FBI did make the investigation, and they identified about 200 people, and that said, these people illegally entered the Capitol and they destroyed property, and they said that's those are what two things they did. When it got up to Mayorkas, he said, "That's unacceptable. This needs to be more like 2,000.
Wow.
Fill it up." And so they now have people. I just recently got the jury instructions that were given for a couple from Texas that were tried on 9 different charges. And as I read it, those 9 charges were all around one thing, but charged different way, just stating it different ways. And the instructions that the judge gave to the jury was 85 pages long. When I
Wow.
got through reading that, if I felt that was instructions for me, I would have found them guilty. And I don't even know what, no matter what they did, there was no way not to arrive at a guilty. So we have a very two-tiered system. I mean, you go ahead and look. I mean, you don't have to look far. To look at the difference between the classified papers.
Mhm.
Biden had classified documents. Nobody's arguing about that. He had no authority to have no authority.
Mhm.
Him having those was a violation of the National Security Act, and he had
Yeah.
them in his garage. Trump had some documents. He had every authority in the world that all he needed to have them because he had them as president. Biden's documents he gathered up as a senator and as vice president,
Mhm.
no authority to
Mhm.
have them, and yet there was no prosecution. Hillary
Right.
Clinton destroyed 30,000 classified emails
Yeah.
and was given a walk. We have
Yeah.
great documentation of bribes being taken by Hunter Biden and the family, and nobody will pick up one sheet of paper against them and do anything. And
Mhm.
you had the government prosecutors doing everything they could trying to get him off the hook. If you recall, about a year or so ago, if he would plead guilty to a tax fraud, part of the deal they gave him was they would drop all charges against him for everything and bring no new
Mhm.
ones on anything new that was found. It was so absurd, and it was only because the some very sharp people made it public. And so we have a
Mhm.
we have a two-tiered system right now that is that, and what's happening with the FBI and the Justice Department. We can talk about border security issues and have difference of opinion. We can talk about taxes. We can talk about property rights and all that, and have a difference of opinion on it. And I may not like what's happening one way or the other, but I can
Mhm.
tell you what's happening as a result of J6 absolutely scares me to death. It's
Wow.
not just disgusting, it's scary because you're talking about the top law enforcement agency in the country is absolutely totally corrupt. I mean, we've always known there's been corruption. There's always
Mhm.
going back to the 50s, we identified, and it generally was rogue agents, and then it got a little bit
Mhm.
worse and a little bit worse. And well, today it is the agency itself. It is totally corrupt. Absolutely.
Wow.
And it's obvious. I mean, it's corrupt in the front pages of the newspapers and magazines by what's
Mhm.
written about and what's not talked about that everybody
Yeah.
knows about.
Right. Well, I think the media is actually really empowering that, though. I mean, I pay attention to media so very much. Obviously, I love media, but I just pay attention to both conservative and liberal media. And it is set up to support anything that is said that doesn't allow you to believe. It's like it's the constant message. I actually saved a few videos from President Joe Biden years ago, not too many years ago, but a few years ago, where he was actually expressing how he was not okay with, some rights for the LGBT community. And I actually have a video where he's talking about how he does not. There were somewhat racist comments, right? And I think so. President Trump made these comments that, the media took and ran with and what have you. And I thought, why in the world is everybody so upset when both of these men pretty much said the same thing, just in their own vocabulary? And it is because the media has constantly fed this into society, right? Through social media, especially. And it works and it keeps you from seeing the truth, like you said, when the Black Lives Matter and all that was going on, you saw it with your own eyes, and it has changed no one's mind. At least nobody who supports, the liberal Democrat side. One of the things I'm doing, Senator, is I feel like a lot of the ways that we're going to get to change people's mind is to educate them individually, personally, one by one. I feel like throwing stuff out on social media is really not changing anybody's mind, right? It just isn't. I made a comment on a social media post last night, and I had a ton of mockery going on, and it kind of made me giggle, right? But I said, you know what? That's okay. I know I can't change their minds. But I know that when you talk to people, or at least that's been my experience talking to people more one-on-one, it's you see the change. Do you see that happening for you? Do you feel like you've been able to help people kind of be stirred back into the place of, let's be intelligent, let's do our own research, let's learn to think for ourselves? What do you say to that?
Oh, I think that we don't have enough of the one-on-one conversations. We don't have enough of the debate, a reasonable, honest debate going on with people. I've talked with groups about this, and for campaigns, I said until we educate the folks out there on what we as constitutional conservatives with Judeo-Christian values really stand for compared to the other side, until they really hear it and understand that the difference there, they are going to continue to think, well, my daddy was a Democrat, so I guess I still am one too.
I've met those people.
Yes, and so no, there's not enough dialogue, and unfortunately, people almost don't know how to have a conversation
True.
in which they discuss things like that without getting aggressive and angry. And
Yes, it's true.
I try to invite uh, discussions like that by telling folks, God gave me two ears and one mouth for a reason,
That's
and He
right.
expects me to use them in that order. And I said, we all come from a different perspective. We have a different viewpoint on things. And I said, so I said viewpoint, not disagreement on an issue.
There you go.
Everybody sees it based on what their input was before it and around it and so on. And I said, I'd rather have my conversations with someone that has a different viewpoint than I do, than with someone that we're just an echo chamber and all we do is pat each other on the back. Because when I'm talking with someone with a different viewpoint, I will learn something. Now,
That's
sometimes
right.
I will learn enough to change my mind, some,
Mhm.
a little bit, a lot. And sometimes I will learn things to make me more firm in how
That's right.
I'm
You're right.
looking at it. But I look at it with the idea of learning from listening.
Mhm.
And I try to put more emphasis on the listening than on the talking side,
That's
because
good.
they just don't learn anything when you're talking.
That's good. Yeah. I'm with you. I love that idea. And I think even too, just trying to find a common ground somewhere. That way you can actually try to have the conversation instead of just arguing back and forth. Well, Senator, I'm not going to take too much more of your time, but I want to know, what would you like to say as we close to Texans, those who love their state, even to Americans? Because, our nation, it's all working together. And what can we take from you that will leave us some hope? We definitely need some hope. We know that everything's, it's looking pretty gloomy out there, but we need some hope. So what can you leave us with that will give us some hope? And what are some instructions that you can give us that will help us put our best foot forward and say, if this is all that I can do, I will start right here?
Okay. Well, I think first of all, that for those that don't visit with God every day as the first thing in the morning, to think about adding that to their itinerary for the
Mm.
day. Just a few minutes
Amen.
on your knees, talking to God, asking for guidance and direction on what to do that day, and asking that He would help you implement His will. I think people would be very surprised at how their attitude changes throughout the day and what they do if they would do that. The other is government is run by people who show up. And right now, we only have about
Good.
30% of the people showing up to vote. And the unfortunate thing is, about 90% of that 30% have no clue who they're voting for when they do. They will have
Mm.
called somebody and say, who should I vote for? or something, or they'll just go in and check names that they recognize without having put any effort into trying to learn whether or not that person should be reelected or not, or should be the new one elected, whatever. They have no clue what's going on.
Mhm.
They don't want to mix religion and politics. And I'm saying that is a old wives' tale that we need to move away from. The two things we need to mix are religions and politics. Now, what we don't
There you
want
go.
is government in our churches, but we definitely want our church in government. And until we
Amen.
can get an attitude of doing that, where we now have pastors, and to answer your question earlier, I think one of the reasons we're where we are today is our pastors have failed us over the
Mhm.
years in an accelerating rate because they're afraid of losing people in their churches, noses and
Yeah.
nickels, I call them, because they might
Yeah.
lose someone that and so as a result we get a bunch of feel good sermons that don't really preach the word of God, and that understanding that our country only works with a righteous people, and we only get righteous people if we have leaders in the pulpit that continually point us towards the right things with God.
That's right.
And so I'd say, to answer your question, they need to get involved,
Mhm.
learn what is happening in your city, your county, and in Texas. Show there are numerous great organizations all over Texas, conservative Christian organizations that pay attention to what's going on. Get involved. Give up a night, a week, a month, a month to go to a meeting and learn what's happening, learn who's representing you, learn what they're doing, and then decide based on what your knowledge of them is whether or not you want to keep them in office and
There
get
you go.
involved.
There you go. Well, thank you so very much, Senator. I appreciate all your great insight. Thank you for being unapologetic and unafraid to stick with your faith first. We need more men and women like yourself, especially representing us in Texas government and the nation. So thank you so very much. How can people find you and reach you if they want to learn more about you?
Well, got a website. It's simply Senator Bob Hall, all spelled out, senatorbobhall.com. I've got a lot of newsletters on there that I put out on issues. I don't write fluff pieces. They're all about something that's gone wrong or needs to be changed. My Facebook page is Senator Bob Hall. And that's I'm not much in Twitter, so or X, whatever it's called now. But those two ways they can follow, sign up for our newsletter. Comes out once every 1 or 2 weeks on issues, about a page and a half long. Uh, and if you have a group out there and you'd like to learn more about some of the key issues, like the two biggest issues that we're working on right now, one is electric grid security, protecting our electrical grid from both natural and man-made disasters, so that because electricity is the second most important thing to sustaining life. The only thing more important than electricity is air, because you'll live longer without water and food than you will without electricity. It's just a given. And the other is the
Excuse me.
complete cleanup of our election system. I've been
Mm,
working on that for a while. I got a paper out. I call it the black box. That talks about elections. I said in Texas they are a black box. There's no accountability. There's no transparency, and the outcomes are actually accuracy of them is actually unknowable the way we
mm,
do it. And it doesn't have anything to do with fraud. It has everything to do with just human error, a very complex system that changes the election. Your vote changes form multiple times between the time you push the button and time the Secretary of State announces the end, and we have no insight to what happens along the way. So we're looking at a clean sheet approach, and I've got a presentation on each of these subjects. It takes about 45 minutes, and I'm going to clubs around the state that would like to learn more about election security and grid security. And all you need to do is call our office and arrange for an event with them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. And we appreciate you being on. Well, there you have it, my friends. You can find Texas State Senator Bob Hall, great man of faith, doing great things. And I hope that this interview has really encouraged you and motivated you. This is time to get involved, especially if you're a Texan, especially if you are in even in his district. We have got to get involved and start making changes one step at a time. Sometimes, Senator, it feels like it's too much. There's too much, and you can't make not one difference. But I can tell you, I've had numerous conversations with different people of different ages. And I can see just by providing education that their minds can be changed for the better. So I'll keep going, and I know you will too. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me. God bless you for what you're doing.
Thank you. God bless. Take care, my